A little girl disappears on her way to school, but where she was the whole time is honestly worse than what anyone could have imagined. So her name is Jessica Ridgway. She's only 10 years old, living with her mom in a small town in Colorado called Westminster. And on the morning of October 5th, 2012, Jessica is standing at her doorway of her home about to get ready to walk to her friend's house so that they could head to school together. And we'll call this friend Kevin. So at around 8 a.m., she hugs her mom, Sarah, goodbye. She grabs her purple glasses, throws on her backpack, and walks straight out the front door. Now, it's super cold outside. Like, the snow is starting to fall, but Jessica doesn't really mind because this walk to Kevin's house is only about like 4 minutes away. But what Jessica doesn't know, what she couldn't have possibly known, is that as she's walking down the street, a very, very dangerous creature is watching her. Meanwhile, just a few houses down, Kevin is sitting at his windowsill and he's looking out at the snow and he's starting to notice how heavy it's getting. He really doesn't feel like walking to school in this weather. So he turns to his dad and he's like, hey, can you drive me and Jessica to school? She's walking here right now. And so his dad looks outside and he sees the snow coming down harder and he agrees without hesitation. He's like, yeah, sure, we'll wait for her and then I'll take both of you guys. So they wait and wait and wait, but oddly, Jessica never shows up. Now, Kevin's dad is checking his watch and he's realizing that school quite literally starts in less than 10 minutes. And if he doesn't leave anytime soon, then Kevin will be late. So he turns to Kevin and he says, look, we cannot wait any longer. Maybe her mom ended up driving her. Let's just go. So they leave, assuming that everything is fine. But when Kevin gets to school, he immediately starts looking around for Jessica. He's checking the hallways, scanning the cafeteria, looking for her everywhere, but still she's nowhere to be found. And when the bell rings for homeroom and the teacher starts doing roll call, just going down the list of names one by one, when she gets to Jessica's name and calls it out, there's only silence. Now, this isn't normal. Like, Jessica is never absent without some sort of note from her mom. So her teacher very quickly marks her absence and sends the note down to the front office, who immediately starts trying to call Sarah to figure out what is going on. The phone rings and rings and rings, but nobody is answering. And here's the problem. The reason that Sarah isn't picking up the phone is because she works night shift at her job, which means that her entire sleeping schedule is completely flipped. Like, when most people are waking up at 7 a.m. and getting ready for their day, that's exactly when Sarah is coming home from work and going straight to bed. Which meant that while the school was calling her, Sarah was sound asleep, completely unaware that her daughter was going through the most horrific, terrifying experience that no child should ever go through. Because when Jessica left her house that morning and started walking down the sidewalk towards Kevin's house, she probably noticed this really nice looking Jeep parked on the side of the road, which didn't really seem unusual or suspicious because, I mean, hello, cars park all the time on the street in her neighborhood. So she probably didn't even think about it, didn't even give it a second glance. But what Jessica didn't know is that the creature inside that Jeep was staring directly at her, watching her every move, just waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And that creature's name is Austin Sigg. He's only 17 years old and he has been sitting in this car for who knows how long, just waiting, planning, obsessing over this exact moment for weeks, maybe even months. You see, Austin wasn't some random predator who just happened to be driving through the neighborhood that morning. No, he lived just 1 mile away from Jessica's house, which meant that he knew this area inside and out. He knew the route that kids would take to school. He knew what time they would leave their houses, and he knew when their parents weren't watching. And for months leading up to this exact morning, Austin has been consumed by these dark, incredibly disturbing fantasies about abduction and control and murder, spending hours and hours researching serial killers online, studying how they operated, learning about dismemberment and how to get away with taking someone's life. And even more disturbing is that he is enrolled in mortuary science classes, and I'm probably not saying it right, but just know he's literally being taught how to handle dead bodies, how to preserve them, how to cut into them. And his poor mom, thinking that he was just being a dedicated student who was serious about his future career, would even let him practice tying people up with zip ties at home, thinking that it was for his crime classes, having absolutely no idea that her son was not preparing for a career. He was preparing for this exact morning, the day that he hunts down Jessica. So when Jessica walked past his Jeep, when she got just close enough that he could reach her, Austin didn't hesitate, not even for a second. He bolted out of his car, ran up behind her before she could even have time to turn around, and wrapped his arms around around her small body, lifting her completely off the ground. And as this stranger is now holding onto her, Jessica starts screaming, probably trying to kick him to get away from whoever is holding her. But she's only 10 years old and Austin is 17 and so much bigger and stronger than her. So pretty quickly, he overpowers her, carries her to his Jeep, and throws her into the backseat like she's nothing. The impact is so hard that it probably knocked the wind out of her for a second, and before she can even catch her breath to scream for help, Austin slams the door shut and the whole car shakes. He then pulls out a pack of zip ties, probably the same ones that he was using to practice with at home, and he grabs Jessica's wrists and he wraps the plastic so tight around her that it digs into her skin, binding her ankles and her hands together so that she can't fight back or try to open the door and escape. And Jessica, this little girl, while all of this is happening, is so scared, so completely and utterly terrified beyond anything that she has ever experienced in her entire life, that she loses control of her bladder right there in the back seat and she wets herself. And now on top of everything else that she's feeling, she's probably also feeling humiliated and scared and thinking, no, this cannot actually be happening right now. And as she sits there shaking and crying, and I applaud her courage for this, Jessica starts screaming at him, "Who are you? What are you going to do to me? Why are you doing this?" But Austin just looks down at her with this scary, calm expression on his face and says, almost gently, like he's trying to comfort her, "Don't worry, I promise you'll be okay. Nothing bad will happen to you. You're safe." "Sir, you have her zip tied in the back of your car. What do you mean nothing bad will happen? This is already the worst thing that could have happened to her." And within just a few minutes, he is already pulling into his driveway because, like I said earlier, he literally lives 1 mile away from Jessica's house. He then quickly drags Jessica out of the car, probably covering her mouth or something so that she can't scream, and very quietly brings her inside the house and into his bedroom, where he then shuts the door behind them. That truly must have felt like the end of the world for her, knowing that there was nothing you could do to free yourself. And once she is in his possession, this is where everything Austin does becomes even more twisted, even more calculated, and just straight up sickening. Because instead of immediately hurting her, instead of showing his true intentions right away, Austin sits Jessica down on his bed like they're just gonna hang out like normal teenagers. He then walks over to his TV and turns it on to some cartoon or kids show. And then he looks at Jessica with this calm expression and says in a reassuring voice, "See, you're safe here. I'm not going to hurt you. Everything's going to be okay. You can just relax and watch TV." He even goes to his own dresser and pulls out one of his own shirts and hands it to Jessica, telling her that she can change out of her wet clothes because they're soaked in urine and probably uncomfortable. And he's acting like he's being considerate, like he's being kind to her, like he genuinely cares for her comfort. But this isn't kindness at all. This isn't even compassion. This is a game that Austin is playing. This is him being deliberately manipulative and cruel because he wants Jessica to let her guard down. He wants her to trust him just a little bit. He wants her to think that maybe this isn't as bad as she thought. Maybe he won't really hurt her and he'll just let her go soon. But eventually, Austin's fake mask comes off. He completely stops pretending being this nice teenage boy who just wants to keep her safe and watch cartoons with her. And what happens next, I need to warn you that this is going to be really difficult to hear, is that Austin assaults her probably multiple times. And when he's done with her, he decides that he's going to end her life. First, he tries using zip ties, taking a fresh one out from his collection and wrapping it around Jessica's neck and pulling it as tightly as he possibly can. But as he's trying to squeeze as hard as he can, he starts to realize that zip ties aren't really working the way that he thought they would. There just isn't enough force behind it. Hey, dumbass, maybe that's a sign to, I don't know, stop. But does he stop? No. Instead, he decides to use his bare hands. He wraps them around Jessica's neck and he starts squeezing even harder than he did before. And he holds it there with this firm death grip for like 3 minutes until eventually her body just goes limp. But even after all of that, even after for so long that his own hands are cramping and tired, when Austin finally lets go and looks down at Jessica, he notices something that makes him frustrated. Jessica is somehow still breathing. I mean, it's barely just these shallow little breaths, but she's still showing signs of life. And I wish so desperately that in this moment, some part of Austin's little brain had kicked in and told him to stop, but that is not what happened. Monsters like him just don't have a heart. Instead, Austin gets up and he walks into the bathroom and he turns on the faucet for the bathtub and he starts filling it up with hot water. And when the tub is full enough, when there's enough water to completely cover a person's head, Austin walks back to the bedroom and he grabs Jessica by her head and drags her across the floor into the bathroom. And Jessica's eyes probably fluttered just for a second as she feels herself being moved, like that survival instinct that maybe, just for a moment, there is this glimmer of hope that he changed his mind. Maybe he's actually gonna help her and this is going to end. But then Austin lifts her up and forces her face first into the bathtub, plunging her head straight under the water. And Jessica is probably fighting for her life, trying desperately to grab onto like the side of the tub to pull herself up. But Austin, this evil creature, is standing over her with his hands pressed firmly on the back of her head, using his entire body weight to hold her down, until eventually her body sadly goes completely still. And now Jessica Ridgway, the girl who woke up this morning excited to see her friends at school, the girl who hugged her mom not even a few hours ago, the girl who had all of these dreams and plans and a whole life ahead of her, is gone. But even with all of that pain that Austin just caused her, this vile creature isn't done with her. He's not even finished. Because while Jessica's body is still floating motionless in this bathtub with her face still submerged in the water, Austin very calmly walks out of the bathroom and gets his hands on a saw. Yes, a freaking saw. Like the thing that you would use for cutting wood or working on construction projects. And he begins dismembering her, using everything that he learned in his mortuary science class about how to body without making mistakes. Now, while all of this is going on, back at Jessica's house, Sarah is finally waking up. It's now 4 p.m. and she's been asleep for like hours, and she's probably expecting for Jessica to be home already. But as you already know, Jessica is nowhere near the house. And when Sarah grabs her phone, maybe to check if Jessica texted her, she sees several missed calls from the school. And immediately, like instantly, her stomach drops and she can feel it in her bones that something really bad has happened. So she calls the school back, and that's when they tell her the news that every single parent dreads hearing more than anything else in the world. Jessica never made it to school this morning. Now, Sarah's brain probably tries to reject this information at first, right? Like finding some type of logical explanation that isn't absolutely terrifying. She's probably thinking, okay, this has to be a mistake. Maybe they forgot to mark her attendance or something. It happens all the time. But the school confirms it. Jessica definitely never arrived. But she couldn't find her anywhere. So rather than wasting more precious time, Sarah grabs her phone with her hands probably trembling from how anxious she is, and she dials 911. And within minutes, literally just minutes, police are pulling up in front of Sarah's house with these lights flashing really bright, and officers are spreading out across the neighborhood, knocking on every single door, asking if anyone saw anything unusual that morning. But no one heard or saw Jessica's screams for help that morning. No one. So for the rest of the entire day, even though officers issued an Amber Alert, even though Jessica's face was everywhere, no one knew that she was already gone. And it wasn't until 2 days later, a man, for story purposes we'll call Joe, is outside taking a walk around the neighborhood on a Sunday afternoon when something on the sidewalk catches his eye. And it's a black backpack just sitting there in the middle of the sidewalk, like someone deliberately placed it there. And Joe's thinking, okay, this is kind of weird. Something about this doesn't feel right. And he looks around to see if there's anyone nearby, but the street is completely empty. And with everything going on with Jessica's disappearance, with the Amber Alerts and the search parties and police everywhere, Joe honestly did not want to take any chances. So he pulls out his phone and he calls 911. And he's like, hey, there's this really suspicious bag here on the sidewalk near my house. Y'all should come and check this out like ASAP. And within minutes, police officers arrive to the scene and they approach the bag very cautiously, treating it like it might be evidence. And when they carefully unzip it and start looking inside, what they find makes their heart stop. First was a child's t-shirt completely soaked in urine, and then there was a pair of pants also wet. and a water bottle. And then, and this is when they know, a pair of purple framed glasses, the same purple glasses that Jessica was wearing when she left her house. And the last item that they pull is a keychain with the name Jessica written on it in colorful letters. The officers all look at each other, and you can tell in their faces they know this is definitely Jessica Ridgway's backpack, which clearly means that something really, really bad happened to her. Someone kidnapped her. But the question still remained. Who? Now, you and I obviously already know the answer to that question, but neither the officers or Sarah know that Austin, this 17-year-old boy who lives just 1 mile down the road, already kidnapped Jessica and killed her. And after taking her life, Austin quickly realizes, oh crap, this is a problem. Like, I've made a huge mess here and my mom's coming home soon. And as he's probably pacing back and forth thinking, oh my god, where do I put her? Where do I hide this? That's when this genius over here decides to just shove Jessica's body parts into this crawl space under his house. Real smart, Austin. You really thought that went through, didn't you? And at some point, Austin either sees the news or maybe an officer knocking on his door asking about Jessica, and he realizes that people are actually looking for this girl. And so now he knows it's only a matter of time before he actually gets caught. So either late that night or early morning on Sunday, he decides to grab Jessica's backpack along with her urine-soaked clothes and drive about 6-7 miles away to this random neighborhood and just place her bag there. I'm guessing he thought that if investigators found her bag there, then they would stop searching in his neighborhood and start searching somewhere else instead. Like, oh my god, I hate whenever these idiots think that they're so smart. Anywho, fast forward to about a week after Jessica disappeared, and no one, not her mom, not the cops, has any idea that they're never going to find Jessica alive. And I could imagine that by this point, Austin is probably feeling really confident. I mean, he still hasn't been caught, right? But I also think that this confidence is actually slowly fading away, because as investigators start bringing out helicopters and more search dogs, as these search parties keep growing and growing and growing, I can only imagine how stressful that must be. Austin, feeling a little nervous there, buddy? And he's probably over here sitting in his room thinking, oh my god, I still have a decomposing body in my crawl space. At some point, my room's gonna start stinking and my mom might smell it. And so he comes up with yet another brilliant idea. I'll just get rid of some of the parts. And that's exactly what he does. He grabs some of Jessica's remains and puts them inside of this black garbage bag. And then he drives to this isolated field in Arvada, about 7 miles away from Jessica's home, looking for where he can dump them at. And he ends up finding this spot like near a culvert, and he checks to make sure that no one's watching. And then he just leaves the bag there like it's regular trash. Then he drives home, probably thinking that he just covered his tracks, probably feeling like he just outsmarted everyone. But spoiler alert, he didn't. Because 3 days later, on October 10th, 5 days after Jessica disappeared, some maintenance workers are working out in that exact field doing their regular rounds, picking up trash. And one of them spots this black bag near the culvert. And he's probably thinking, okay, this is just regular trash. So he plans on walking over there to toss it into his truck. But when he lifts the bag, he immediately notices that it's way heavier than it should be. And there is this awful stench coming from it. So he sets it back down and he opens it. And I don't know why he did that, but he did. And what he finds makes him stumble backwards so fast that he almost falls. And I'm not even gonna go into all of the gory details because it is genuinely horrific, and I honestly don't think that any of us need this image in our heads. And so eventually police arrive and they secure the area, and they carefully collect the remains and rush them to the coroner's office. And they pretty quickly figure out that these remains 100% belong to Jessica Ridgway. So now these investigators, some of whom are parents themselves, are sitting here in this room. Some of them are bawling their eyes out because now they have to try to figure out a way to make this horrible phone call to Sarah. They have to tell this mother that her little girl is never walking through her front door again, never going to give her another hug, never going to grow up and go to college and get married and have her own kids. All of that is gone now because of one evil teenager. Now at this point, no one still has any idea who could have done all this. All they knew is that from the DNA evidence that they collected is that the perpetrator is a male. That's it. But then one afternoon, so about 2 weeks after finding that bag, a mother calls 911. And she sounds really distressed, but she takes one deep breath and says this.
Hi, I need you to come to my house. My son wants to turn himself in for the Jessica Ridgway murder.
So it turns out that for reasons that I don't fully understand, maybe Austin felt that investigators were like closing in on him. Maybe the guilt was eating him alive. Who knows? But he woke up one day and very anxiously walked over to his mom, Mindy, and said, "Mom, I have something horrible to tell you." And his mom, probably feeling like her entire world started to crumble, immediately asks what's wrong. And that's when Austin confesses everything. How he took Jessica, how he killed her, how he cut into her body in their bathtub, and how he put her pieces in their crawl space. And as you can imagine, Mindy's jaw absolutely hit the freaking floor. Like, imagine hearing that your own son, your own child, confesses that he did something so unspeakably evil to a little girl. Like, what do you even do in that moment? Is there a guidebook called What to Do When Your Son Becomes an Absolute Monster? But despite her feelings, despite the fact that that's her son, Mindy knew exactly what she had to do. She knew that her son had gone way too far and that she did not want him to hurt anyone else. And so the mother that called 911 that afternoon, turning her son in, was Mindy. And as she continued explaining to the dispatcher how her son did it, she said the sentence, "Her remains are in my house." That's not a sentence that you would ever expect to say, you know? Eventually, Mindy passes the phone to Austin and he starts saying, "I did it. I murdered Ridgway. You have to send a squad car here, like now. I'm confessing." And so police speed to Mindy's house with the lights flashing and the sirens wailing. I mean, you can imagine. And when they get there and they start searching, everything is exactly where Austin said it would be. The tools that he used, the cleaning supplies, pieces of Jessica's remains hidden in the crawl space, everything confirming that this innocent little girl was right here in this house while his mom was at work, completely unaware. Officers immediately cuff him. Good, now keep it like that. And he is taken into custody and brought to the station where he sits for a 6-hour confession, just laying out every single horrific detail. And when investigators ask him why would you do something like this, something so horrific to a child, Austin looks at them and he says, and this is a direct quote by the way, "I wanted to see what it felt like. I was fulfilling a sexual fantasy. I wanted to know if I could actually go through with killing someone." What? Okay guys, I'm done. Keep him locked up, please. Austin got tried as an adult and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Oh my God, why am I so obsessed with that sentence? Let me say it again. Without the possibility of parole, which means that he will die behind bars. He will never breathe fresh air again, and he will never see the outside world. And honestly, some people would argue that that's not nearly harsh enough for what he did. But what do you guys think? And listen, I know that this one was a heavy one. It absolutely destroyed me while I was researching and writing this. But I think that it is most important that we remember Jessica, not as a victim, but as a person who was loved and had so many dreams and deserved an amazing life. Every year on what would have been her birthday, Sarah actually releases these purple balloons into the sky to honor her daughter's memory. And I think that's beautiful. So if you made it this far, then maybe if you want, drop a purple heart in the comments, and if her mom or a family member ever sees this, then they know that Jessica will always be loved and remembered. I love you guys. Mwah, group hug.